Joining me is Lorraine Merrill, the New Hampshire Commissioner for the Department of Agriculture, and I shortened it this time. Markets and food, so get the full name out there. But I do want to talk about agriculture. 200 years ago, New Hampshire was a state of agriculture, and that sort of changed. Is agriculture on the waning or waxing in New Hampshire recently?
Oh, it's growing. We have had in the last 2 agricultural censuses, which are conducted every 5 years by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, we have had really significant growth in the number of farms. From 2002 to 2007, we grew 24% in the number of farms, and then from 2007 to 2012, we grew another 5%. So we're really seeing a lot of activity, and New Hampshire, it's a small state, and we have a small agricultural industry compared to many other states, and yet we rank first in the nation in the percentage of our farm sales that are direct to consumer sales.
So, we think of other states as farm-to-market states, but we're
number one in
New
terms
Hampshire's
of the percentage of the total sales that are done between a farmer and a consumer directly.
So we're really a state that's not agribusiness and on a large scale. It's agribusiness on a community scale.
That's really true. That really describes it pretty well. We are small and medium-sized farms with a lot of interaction between our communities, our neighbors, and the farms. We're also number 2 in the percentage of the farms, all the farms in the state that report direct to consumer sales. It's almost a third. So almost 1 out of 3 farms is doing some of their business directly with consumers.
As opposed to a wholesaler.
A wholesaler, right.
Or a grocery store, a farm.
Exactly.
So it's you can show up, or I go to the local farmer's market.
It's farmers markets, farm stands, CSAs, very popular, and that's another area that we really shine compared to other states. We're one of the top 10 states. I just went to a marketing conference for farmers yesterday, and it's amazing the many ways that farms in New Hampshire have created CSA, community supported agriculture programs. These are like farm shares.
So how does that work exactly?
It works, there are many different ways because farmers have been so creative about it, but basically the customer buys a share in that farm's produce for the season, and then they pay in advance usually, and then they get through the season, and there are so many different ways of doing it. It shows how responsive farmers are to their particular markets. Some are in urban areas, some are in very rural areas, and they're really making these things work. And some farmers yesterday at this conference were saying they hadn't imagined that people would really want to pay in advance for food, and then but their customers kept asking, and they wanted a CSA. So we see farmers using many different channels. They'll have a farm stand, they'll also go to farmers markets, and they may have several different CSA programs.
How you're giving us percentages. How big is the number that we're looking at in terms of farms dollars?
Oh, in farm dollars, let's see, it's the total. There are, like, say in certain counties, we've got 5 million a year, 3 million a year, and so forth. Not going to do the total. 20 million plus for the state direct to consumer sales in 2012. That's what.
So that's a lot of groceries.
It is a lot of groceries. It is. Even at that, people in New Hampshire are really spending a tiny fraction of their food dollars locally. So you can imagine what it would do if everybody just increased a little bit their local buying.
And what happens to the farmers who do this in the winter? Is that sort of...
It's another big growth area. We're seeing winter farmers markets.
What are they selling?
Go to one and find out. In many areas, they're selling fresh greens all winter.
No kidding.
Certainly the traditional seasonal root vegetables, and then you'll have things like honey and maple syrup and meats and cheeses and all of those that are seasonless, if you will.
Are some of our farmers actually using like hothouse sort of to be able to sprout stuff and then, you know, some microgreens and that type of thing? That's
Exactly. Many of them are not even hothouses, but they're what we call high tunnel greenhouses. They aren't necessarily
you'll have to
heated.
explain what a high tunnel.
It's like there are these hoop houses that you'll see, usually plastic covered, large arch shaped. And they've become very, very popular. They extend the growing season on either end. You can keep growing things later into the season or start them sooner. So you'll also see things arriving at farm stands and farmers markets earlier in the season, things like peppers and tomatoes and greens.
We're out of time. I want to continue our conversation.